I think I never did this. Right. Welcome to everybody joining us here in Huntingdon. This is the meeting of the Cambridge and Peterborough Combined Authority Environment and Sustainable Communities Committee. My name's Councillor Bridget Smith, and I am on the board of the Combined Authority, and I lead on the environment for them. So we allow filming, so obviously go ahead with that if you want to. We've got no fire drills scheduled, so if it goes off, then we'll have to get out. And obviously, this meeting is being recorded. So we've got a fairly hefty agenda here. So we'll start off with announcements. Right, so I'd like to start off by extending a warm welcome to Councillor Gavin Elsey, who's the new Peterborough member of the committee. Really pleased you've been able to join us. Sorry that you've had so many meetings descend into your diary in a very short period of time, but hopefully this will be one that will be pleasurable to you and will be productive. Do we have any apologies for today?
We have apologies from Belinda Karp, the business board representative.
And no substitute?
No.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Are there any items on today's agenda that anybody would like to declare a disclosable pecuniary interest or a non-statutory disclosable interest, please? No, if anything pops into your mind during the meeting, then just declare it then. So we start off with the minutes and the action log. So before the meeting, Councillor Davenport Ray raised an issue of accuracy in regard to Huntingdonshire's net zero target. To clarify this issue, the minutes have been amended at 5.2a to add the words for internal council operations. You're happy with that, are you? Jolly good. With that addition, is the committee happy to approve the minutes of the 11th September 2023, an accurate record, and to note the action log, or are there any other issues? Nope, jolly good. Thank you very much indeed. So I see no objections. So we'll take the minutes as approved and the action log as noted. Public questions? I don't think we have any this today, do we?
No.
Okay. So if any members of the public, we welcome questions from you. So if there is anything crops up from this meeting you'd like to put forward for the next one, please do, or just email us and ask us something. So forward plan. So that's item 4. Let me just find it here. Righty ho. So item 4 is the Combined Authorities Forward Plan. Are there any questions or comments, or can we take this as noted as well? Councillor Davenport Ray.
If I'm looking forward into the springtime, perhaps March, there are 2 additions I think would be welcome. An update from the Greater Southeastern Net Zero Hub on their work so far. I think Maxine might be here later. And then also, one of the items you'll see in the budget is Huntingdonshire's Biodiversity for All program, and our officers would like to visit us in March as well to provide an update on what we've used that funding for and our successes.
That would be fine, I'm sure. The net zero hub work, which I get briefed on at length, is pretty meaty stuff. But I'm sure we can. And obviously, we're not actually part of that hub. We sit outside of it, but we obviously have a responsibility for it. So I'm sure that they'll be very happy to come and give a report on it. So thank you for that. Anything else? No. Okay. So in which case. We will move on to Director's Highlight Report. So that's over to Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. I'll be very brief, just going through the highlights in the report, which is to capture some of the items that are not on the agenda, but also updates on things that you've previously seen and whatever else has happened in the meantime. So progress on establishing the climate website is being made. We want to bring that to your attention quite soon in terms of the role it can play in capturing data and intelligence, but also being very open about the work of the Climate Partnership and the Programme Board. So that's up and pretty much up and running, and we'll be able to share more details on that very shortly. Some detail around housing site completions. This is the Affordable Housing Programme. Some good progress being made, and as you can see, a number of sites that will be, we'll talk about them later on the agenda, but will be coming through to completion very soon. The performance report, we've got a summary there. It's not on this agenda. It's going to the Combined Authority Board at the end of the month, and then we'll come back to this committee for our next meeting in January. But important to note in there some of the metrics, very important corporate metrics around CO2 emissions across the area is one that has been elevated as a corporate KPI. The infrastructure delivery framework, you'll recall this from June. We've now completed the process procurement to commission consultants to come in and help us with that. That's about to go live. And this is about looking at the obstacles to growth, to sustainable growth, be it utilities, energy, transport, and getting a real feel for how for what those obstacles are, what some of the solutions are, and how we can overcome them, and the costs of doing that. I think a really important piece of work that we'll be reporting back into this committee as it progresses. I won't go through all of the rest. An update from the Oxford to Cambridge partnership again, which was Nathan Veer, who we've been working with, and he came along kindly to the Climate Partnership Group recently. So there are some of the highlights, Chair, from the highlight report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I spent some time, was it last week, interviewing for a non-executive director for the Oxford-Cambridge Partnership with a particular focus on environment. That was quite missing. There was a lot of very economy-focused people. We're actually spoilt for choice, so it hasn't been announced yet. But we had some really quite exciting people, and the preferred candidate was great. So that will be, hopefully will foster really strong links with that person as well. Are there any questions? I'll take Councillor. You just pipped her, did you? Councillor Davenport Ray and then Councillor Dupre.
I wanted to ask about one of the metrics that's in the appendix that's in our KPIs. Metric 10 is about CO2 emissions across the region. The metric that we're tracking is net carbon. And I'm wondering if there's any scope for us to understand better the gross carbon. Because I'm interested that if the trend is going down, does that mean that we're producing less carbon emissions, or are we sequestering more carbon emissions, or are we, how can we understand that trend a little bit more? If it were to, it went up a little bit in the last quarter, so that might help us better understand the change in trends.
Yeah, no, really helpful point, and I think the sort of underneath that is the economy and development is still happening. So there is a growth in carbon as a result of that and ongoing increases. So we do need to understand both the gross and the net and the progress that we're making against both. So I'll certainly take that away. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dupre?
Thank you. I just wanted to make a couple of points or ask a couple of questions about the National Infrastructure Commission update at 3.2 in two respects, but they are linked. When we met the National Infrastructure Commission in this very room some time ago, an issue I raised and which they seemed to take on board and I think was referenced in their latest report was the issue of the dilapidation of our road infrastructure in many parts of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough due to extreme weather and the underlying soil under those roads. Technically, that is a county council responsibility, but it very much needs the support of the combined authority in pressing for the very, very significant investment far beyond what is available to the county council that is needed. And we really need the support of the combined authority in pressing for investment, not just in new roads, which are nice and popular because you can cut a ribbon on a new road and all the rest of it, but on rebuilding those thousands upon thousands of kilometres of roads that are not just in Cambridgeshire but further afield. But my concern is Cambridgeshire, that are really at serious risk and are already showing all the dilapidation that comes from the destruction of the underlying substructure of the road. That's the first point. And a related point is the issue of flood protection, and the update mentions flooding and water management, but the Great Ouse baseline report was published back in, was about 6, 7 years ago now, which showed the levels of investment that were going to be necessary to ensure continuation of flood protection for all the residents and businesses and farmland in the area around the Great Ouse in the levels. And since then, we've seen rampant inflation, and we have also seen the uh, increase in the speed of climate change that is making that task not only more expensive but also more urgent. And I would be very much wanting this body to be liaising and continuing to press the National Infrastructure Commission about the necessary flood defences to protect many, many people and much economic activity and transport activity in the levels. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dupre. The road conditions kind of outside the remit of this committee, isn't it? Please.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Councillor Dupre. Yeah, the soil affected roads or the drought affected roads across the fens is probably a combination of Environment Committee and TIC, but also importantly a responsibility for the two highway authorities. So there's 2 points I think on the National Infrastructure Commission. One of the recommendations is for a 5-year investment highway investment program that all other mayoral combined authorities have. It's called City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement. We don't have it, so we've been pushing very hard for that to be something that comes our way as it rightly should. And actually, the NIC was recommending that beyond mayoral combined authorities, local authorities across the country should also have a 5-year settlement. So, we need to get in there ahead of that. And that will give us the certainty to be able to invest in the highway in a way that reflects the local priorities that we have. And I think the dimension on the soil affected roads from a combined authority perspective is the economic impact that not sorting out the problem could have in terms of rural connectivity, economic isolation, and some of the access to services, and to be able to run a bus network efficiently as well. So we're looking at what we can do as part of the budget planning process that will come to the board in draft form at the end of November. The budgets will be settled at the end of January, to see if there's a way that we can support the County Council and the City Council of Peterborough in addressing that. And I think the wider point around flood costs is absolutely something we should look at and come back to.
Should we be looking at a joint paper between this committee and TIC on what the potential economic consequences are of not maintaining, the road infrastructure here?
I think that'd be a really good idea. I think the sort of the strategic sort of impacts are huge, both from an environmental perspective and also from a transport perspective. The two are very closely connected. So yeah, I think if we can get the work, get the funding allocated, get some work going on it as soon as we can, then I think both committees, I'm sure, would want to see the outcome of that.
Okay. Well, obviously, we just have a think about that, and obviously discuss it with the mayor outside the meeting. Okay. On floods again, I'm not quite sure where our responsibility sits on flood protection and flood management.
I think they sit out elsewhere. But having said that, rather like the soil affected roads, where there's an impact on the economy in terms of achieving the vision that we collectively have for the growth and sustainable growth of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. Flooding has an impact on that, and it sort of detracts from investment, has real impact locally. So I think there's a role for us to play, if not directly, certainly in supporting our local lead flood authority.
Yeah. Okay. So yes, that kind of it feeds into potentially a paper, doesn't it? Because when I look at Suffolk and Framlingham, which I know extremely well, all the businesses have been wiped out in the centre of town, so there's an immediate knock-on effect on the very local microeconomy there. I'll take you back, Councillor Pren, then I'll come to Councillor
just
Paul
very
Jones.
quickly to say I'm very aware that these things aren't necessarily directly the responsibility of this committee, but we do have a very multi-layered local local government in Cambridgeshire. We're supposed to call it the rich governance environment, aren't we? We have one of those, and that does mean that things affect each other, and decisions made by tiers affect each other. But also the point I was trying to make was we did make these points very strongly to the National Infrastructure Commission in this room here as the combined authority, bringing together the various interests. And I think we need to be following up the key points that we made to them at that time.
Thank you. And you know, the combined authority is all about the economy of our region and these things that impact potentially very negatively on the economy. I think we can feed things in that way. Thank you, Councillor Todd Jones, and then I'll come to the Mayor.
Is that on? Yeah. Yeah, just the point really, it strikes me in this discussion that we do have to be mindful about not to blur too much the distinction between what the combined authority can do in terms of its strategic overview and its support for its constituent authorities, as opposed to demands from the county council or other constituent authorities in terms of what their direct remit is. So I think we do have to be very mindful of that, and in any ongoing discussions, that very much has to be, I think, fed through into any paper or discussions that come out of that.
Thank you. Point well made. Agree. Mayor?
I would also follow on from Councillor Todd Jones' sort of transactional need for the combined authority in that strategic space, working with constituent members. But just as a point of reassurance and to draw attention to it, and for the benefit of the minutes, it's a matter of fact that one of the mayoral priorities is an absolute recognition of the kind of unique of that one particular area of the fens, and how actually investment, be it in roads, be it in looking at flood management, water management, which we talked about at length at the summit last week, as well as the kind of potential benefits of the massive opportunity of a new reservoir, and how that in the course of time can bring stuff for the economy in terms around tourism and further investment around transport, is absolutely front and centre a mayoral priority. So for reassurance, and I'm grateful for the obviously discussions that happened in the infrastructure committee, those representations that were made at the time. And I'd say thank you, Steve, for covering all the idea about the longer term ambition to get 5-year settlements, because I'm sure that would be very helpful, and it would be nice if we were more aligned with other combined authorities in other areas of the country.
Thank you very much. Councillor Elsley, and then I'll come back to Steve in case there's anything else to pick up.
Thank you, Chair. If the members of the committee can forgive me for the first couple of weeks, I've read through the reports, but I haven't read them in the detail that I would normally do so. So to some degree, my commentary is in collaboration with officers, as opposed to my own independent thoughts as well as officers. But I had a briefing with the team responsible for the environment, and one of the things that they wanted to point out on this matter was that there's no mention of PCC being involved. So we would like to stress that we would be happy to contribute in the development of the thematic performance reports, because at this moment in time there's no mention of us doing so.
That would be welcome. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, just to echo that, absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Elsie. And I think just the wider point from Councillor Todd Jones about the role of the combined authority and supporting, combined authority is the combined authority of all our local authorities, and we share, I think, a common vision about where we want to get, what we want to achieve. So where we can, as a combined authority, enable, facilitate, convene, provide evidence that backs the priorities that we collectively want to see delivered, I think that's a very positive thing. But we've got to make sure we work within our rich governance environment. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Councillor Davenport-Ray.
One more question on the KPIs. It's sort of about timing. So the KPIs in front of us are from Q1. So this will be as of June. And we know that they're going to go to the board in November. There are 5 metrics that fall within the remit of this committee. 3 of them are red. So I'm wondering, given the urgency of the climate crisis in front of us, whether we really have the swiftness of response able to be able to address, if they are what are we going to do about them if the board is not going to receive that information until 6 months after it's accurate. So I'm just wondering if we could go away and think about that and how we might respond. I don't need an answer now.
Do you want to comment, Steve?
Only to completely agree that we can't let the sort of the process of KPI setting and reporting to guide when we do things. There's a lot that we do need to be getting on with, and the KPI process can catch up. So yeah, we'll certainly take that point away. It's a helpful one. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm aware that there's only so much you can achieve in a meeting like this. I'm kind of thinking perhaps we need to think, perhaps in the new year, about having some sort of workshop with members of this committee where we can sort of get down to the nitty gritty of stuff and really sort of interrogate these KPIs and so on. I think might be because there's only so much we can do in this. Would that okay, right? That'd be helpful, and perhaps sort of get some experts in, and we can make some decisions about. Do we need to lose some stuff? Are we trying to do too much? Is it best to do less really well than a lot less well? Yeah. Okay. So we okay with that? All right. Good. Okay. So we'll leave that with officers to have a think about. So we've been asked to note the report, which I think we've done. So moving on to item 6. So a warm welcome to the new chair of Natural Cambridge, Martin Dole. Do you want to come up and if you press the middle button, you get a microphone, Martin. So Martin's been in place for a month, so it's 100% up to speed, and but it'd be really nice to hear about your experience and your sort of motivation and what you hope to achieve with this this organisation, which actually we all have a massive amount of respect for and huge hopes for the future.
Well, thank you, and thank you also for that stating that respect. It's felt and appreciated, may I say, at the start. You asked me to say a couple of things about myself. Well, probably the most important thing is I've been a resident actually in Manchester since 1991, although I've worked in many different places in that period. I was in the Royal Air Force for 28 years, and one of the highlights of my career was being Station Commander RAF Brampton, Witton, and Henlow locally. I finished in the Royal Air Force in 2008 as the Director of Training and Education for all three armed forces. So my engagement with this agenda has most often been around the skills aspect of sustainability. After leaving the Air Force, I was the Chief Executive of the Association of Colleges in London, looking after and representing all of the further education colleges across the country. Again, engaged around the skills agenda and working closely with government in developing policy around skills and green skills for the environment. I left the association in 2016 and became the first professor of skills and further education at UCL, where I was in an endowed chair for 3 years. I finished just ahead of lockdown in that full-time role and moved to a visiting professor role and have taken on a range of non-executive roles. But those non-executive roles have hitherto been mostly centred in London at a national level. And because of that connection back to Manchester, to Huntingdonshire, and to the Cambridgeshire, I felt I wanted to make a contribution locally. And I was asked to be, if I might wish to be considered as chair of Natural Cambridgeshire. And I have to say, motivated both by living here, my engagement with the green skills agenda, but also by the pandemic of just getting out and amongst our countryside and being a part of this community and seeing what is already being achieved, but what more there is to do, was a huge motivation to me, my family, and the people I've been working with previously. So that was where I came to it. What have I found since? Well, first of all, I've had to learn a absolutely new language of acronyms amongst a group of people that are hugely committed, hugely knowledgeable, and somewhat intimidating to work with. But passion, commitment, and knowledge doesn't mean to say everyone works in a coordinated and usual fashion. They can all agree sometimes the overall objectives, but how we get there is more difficult to see and achieve. But I think building on its work as the local nature partnership, which has been in place since 2012, on basically on the back of goodwill and the commitment of trustees and board members. We're at a stage now, what I'd probably call, it's an overworked phrase locally or regionally, an inflection point where we go forward from here. The committee trustees are hugely impressive, and they brought their expertise to the table. That's volunteers, individuals, but also representatives of the various bodies that work throughout the county. So the RSPB, the wildlife trusts, all of these people are in, and also farmers, landowners, land managers are all around that table. And they've been able to be unified around what's one of my predecessors' concept, which one I think though you've taken up, and I'm very grateful you have, the concept of doubling nature. That's a clarion call, but it also gives a sense of direction about what we want to achieve on behalf of the county and its occupants and its residents. So with that in place, we've got a call to work towards, and something I can help to unify through the board action going forward. Then you provided the Doubling Nature Fund, which has been transformational. We've just launched our first 3 projects due to go out to contracting to be innovative from that fund, spread across the county in some geographical spread, but more looking at how innovative they are and how they can leverage in additional funds to ensure you get best value for money for your investment in terms of output, and actually also bringing in extra commitments. Those are in the contracting phase now. It's taken a little longer than we might have expected, but I want to get those contracts right, because these are the first 3, which will then allow us to look to the remaining projects, to use the remaining funding in a good way, rather than just ploughing forward to get the money spent. We're going to learn, and then we're going to go to the next stage. At the same time, we've got a small part of that fund being allocated to community, bottom-up type projects. And I'm pleased to be able to say that the first deadline for applications was November, and we've had a surfeit of applications, so we're in a good place, even though the timelines are very tight. We're going out on further calls for funding opportunities there. Looking forward to seeing what those projects will be and what we'll be able to do with the funding. All of that has been really helpful, the actual funding for the Doubling Nature, but also the core funding that you provide us with to take forward the work of the local nature partnership. And we've been using that with the 2 officers and hopefully to take on some admin support now. The work is now flowing at us. And I talked to colleagues about the LNRS when we were at the event last week. I think that presents a huge opportunity to do what I would call, from my military background, is how you bring together emergent strategy, the things we're all doing, into a coherent whole. Also to identify where there might be future gaps, things we can do, and what action then we can take forward to deliver. And I'm pleased that we have the co-chair. Our officer, Pamela Abbott, is the co-chair of the LNRS steering group. Looking forward to taking the work forward through that steering group, and grateful indeed for the funding that we're receiving in order to do that. But we are at that point now where we have a solid coalition to get things done, doing things bottom up as well as top down, connecting government initiatives, statutory initiatives with voluntary activity to actually have that alliance in that coalition to move things forward in a very effective way. So that's where we stand now. I'm really excited. Don't ask me any difficult questions, because after 4 weeks, my probably grasp of the detail is only still growing. So thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, you're obviously a catch, so we're very pleased to have you. You've got a very, very impressive background, so that's fantastic. And you've said all the things that I hope to hear from you, so that's great. It'd be quite good to have sort of perhaps quarterly reports back, wouldn't it, on progress? Is quarterly a reasonable can I leave it? I'll leave it with you to have a think about. So so excellent. And as I say, it's a scarily accomplished group of people, isn't it? So with just so more knowledge than I would ever hope to have, but working very, very well together. Are there any questions for Martin? Lara.
I have two questions. I promise they won't be too hard. Hard as they like. Fine. So there's the Doubling Nature Fund, and there's the LNRS, another acronym, Local Nature Recovery Strategy. Outside of those two projects, as the combined authority moves into its budget planning for 2024-25, are there other areas that you would like more thought to be put into in the combined authority's budget?
Well, one's the selfish issue that we'd like to go forward to the next budget period for ourselves in terms of core funding. We presently spend a good amount of time actually going around to seek additional funding from each of the individual councils here, which takes a lot of time up for our officers rather than having it from a central source. So some modest increase in the amount of money we receive directly from the CPCA would actually allow us to work more profitably and usefully to actually make the best use of time. So we're in conversations with Adrian in terms of a presentation for that core funding, which should be modestly increased, but more pointedly, is to come from a central source. In terms of what comes next, I really think we need to think about the other side of LNRS. There's a tendency that I've seen in the past to spend all the time writing a strategy which looks wonderful, feels great, goes on a shelf, and that's where it sits. If we want to make this something that matters, we need to think the other side is the final stage of a strategy is what the plan is, what the deliverables are, and what we will do next. So I'd like to be thinking about the action. So no straight answer to you. What I need is additional funding, but I think the LNRS gives us the clue to where we'll need additional funding beyond the generous amount of money you've given us for the projects now. But I also need, and I'm stressing this quite often to people with already at this stage as chair within Natural Cambridgeshire, we need to deliver and be credible and develop further the trust we already have on delivery. So I want to focus on consolidation and getting done and well spent the money from the Dublin Nature Fund and the support we're having at LRS. So we can then have a really solid base to go and get things done. We can all try and do things quickly in a blunderbuss fashion, but we need to do things well and to deliver value. But we need to think about the next stage on. Hope that answers the question.
Well, that leads nicely into my second question, which is about the LNRS. I have a lot of hope that it won't just end up on the shelf. There's a lot of discussion in the Lords about the specifics of how the end results will interact with local plans and the specific legal wording around that. But when we look back to the Environment Act that created the idea for LNRS, it specifically requests in regions that all of the authorities are working together with the local nature partnership. Is that happening in our region? Are all of our parties coming together and writing this document together so we have something to support when we get to the end?
I want to be careful what I say here because yes is the answer I feel in terms of involvement. There is a steering group that has been formed, where has representation from each of the authorities. I'm very pleased to that, except for one, who chosen not to stand in the way of that development of the strategy, but wishes to comment later on its proposals. So we're working with that and working through that particular issue. I can see the steering group is quite large for the task it's been given, but because of the wish to involve all the local authorities and a range of other agencies, it's grown into quite a large group. But I think it's better to have the widest involvement in drawing up the strategy before it's agreed, rather than it to pop out of 5 people's head and then be imposed on people or then have a fight to get it adopted. So our preference is to have all involved in the room at the outset and to draft together, but we'd respect others that want to reserve their position.
Thank you. That's quite tricky, isn't it? Okay, might discuss some of that offline. Do you want to make any comments, Steve? No, thank you very much indeed. Now you're very welcome to sit through all the rest of our meeting, but you probably have better things to do. But you're welcome if you'd like to.
If I may, have stayed for a while, but not all the way
Please
through.
do,
Thank you.
please do. Thank you very much for coming. We look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you.
Jolly good. Thank you. So moving on to item 7, which I'm sorry.
Sorry, it wasn't really a question for Martin, so I waited until after Lara and yourself, raised the issues you wanted to raise. It was more a question, I assume, for someone else about the appendix, which confused me slightly. The timeline. The first chunk of that is the co-design phase, May 2023 to November 23, and yet we have in lines 9 and 10. The first one, a timeline of starting September 23, finishing in January 2023, which seems somewhat interesting. And the 910 is signing off by this committee in January 23 and ending in January 23 in order to inform a rollout in November 2023, which seems a bit odd as well as
So
it's in the
you've
section
jumped onto
below.
item 7, have you?
Oh,
Because
sorry, I didn't.
Martin was item 6.
So the appendix is a separate item.
So on the agenda,
I'm sorry. Let's
talking to
go back.
Martin was item 6, which we were just finishing, and we're just now about to move on to item 7, which is the local nature recovery strategy.
Oh, I'm sorry. We were
Okay,
talking about the
you've got
national.
ahead of yourself,
I'm
Chancellor Dupre.
sorry. I'm so
That's all
sorry.
right. Okay, so look, can we just go back to the kind of the drawing board, and no, you're very welcome. We'll pick up your question. I'll probably have to ask you to ask it again. But I'll start with Adrian, please, who's going to introduce this item since he's sat there. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And I will pick up the appendix, and you have spotted that there's some incorrect information in there, so I'll cover that. But just to start the report overall, I'm also joined online by Quinton Carroll to represent the fact that we are using the County Council as our operating agent in effect, and he is the other co-chair of the steering group to bring us all in line on this. So just a reminder, this is the new statutory duty for us. We have funding from government. We've already covered the point that government funding is to get the strategy in place, and there's a big question mark as to what comes after that from a central government point of funding. But certainly within the work that we're bringing forward, we're very clear that this is a means to an end, which is improving nature. So we will absolutely be focusing as we develop it on the implementation side, not just the technicalities of meeting what we have to do according to the Act. In terms of progress, we have appointed 2 consultants to carry out key pieces of work for the strategy. So we have Natural Capital Solutions, who are doing the mapping of the information, so the habitats. They've got a great heritage of work that they've done in the area to build on, so we're really pleased to have them on board. And then as part of the process, we have land use consulting as a consultancy to help with the authorship of the actual document itself. And then, as we've heard, there is the steering group, which brings together the authorities, supported by a development group, which is a even bigger group, but very much get into the nitty gritty of policies, and then thematic groups looking at different habitats, so that we've covered all the different aspects through that. In terms of the timing, the first thing to note is that this LNRS was an important part of an overall program by government to deliver on biodiversity net gain. And when it's adopted, this will have weight in planning decisions. We had been hoping to be much more advanced by this point as across all local NRS productions, but government guidance was delayed and delayed, and we put a lot of things in place ready, but unfortunately the timetable has had to be adapted to the fact that that didn't come in the time we expected. So in terms of the timetable, and we will circulate an updated one so you've got it correct in front of you, but it's essentially we're reporting to a June cycle in terms of the next key stages. So the mapping work, the habitat work is now underway. So that will be going through into the spring, and then the working group will be developing the draft to come back. So apologise that we've got the old timetable, but we will circulate that refresh. But in terms of discussions we've been having with our Natural England contact, they're very pleased with the progress that Cambridge and Peterborough have been making on the LNRS compared to some other areas. So overall, the LNRS is expected to take sort of 18 months, and we would be looking at a March 25 sort of approval under that timetable. I think I'll leave it there in terms of any questions that you might have.
Thank you very, very much. Councillor Dupre, have your questions been answered now as part of that? That's lovely. Councillor Davenport-Ray, I know you had some points you wanted to raise.
Well, first of all, Adrian, I know you mentioned perhaps we're not as far along as we had hoped, but from speaking to other regions of the country, we're probably in the lead in terms of nationally where different LNRS progresses are. So don't feel too disheartened about that. But I have a question for Quentin, I think. In the timeline, there's another document that's described called the BNG support document. Can you tell us more about what that is, and once it's complete, how the constituent authorities might be able to use it?
Yes, certainly, Councillor. This was because under the Environment Act, it sets out both the statutory requirements for biodiversity net gain through planning and also the LNRS, which is designed to inform ambitions for BNG. And the idea was they were going to run on identical timetables. Now, that simply hasn't happened. And with the delays getting information out of DEFRA. So LNRS, as Adrian has explained, was supposed to be implemented around now, but has been pushed back for a further 18 months. And BNG, as a planning requirement, was also supposed to be introduced in November 23. Now, that's been pushed back into January 24, so far as I'm aware. Because again, the government guidance hasn't been received about that. I'm going to preface this by saying this is my first day back after a month's sick leave, so it's quite possible there's something in my 1,000+ unread emails about this. But as far as I'm aware, we're still waiting for that guidance. Now, what we'd hope to do is being able to produce something to help inform interim BNG policies. So there was a document there to allow local planning authorities to at least get an idea of the ambitions and direction of LNRS to inform emerging BNG, to try and ensure we didn't have a period of 18 months without guidance for BNG. Now, because we didn't get the LNRS guidance through quickly enough, and because BNG has been delayed, that's a bit up in the air at the moment, because basically the two things haven't aligned as we had originally hoped they would align when we first made that proposal to this committee, which I think was early this year. Your second question was about engagement by others. Was that?
No, I think you've answered my question. Thank
Well,
you, Quentin. Good luck with your inbox.
Thank you. So I'm pleased to see you back. I'd heard you were unwell, Quentin, so I hope you're fully recovered. If I could just pick up a point here. So it is concerning that the time frame for delivery is getting further and further away, obviously through no fault of our own. But we're currently in discussions with Michael Gove about turning us into Silicon Valley. So it's really quite imperative at the moment that we have some sort of evidence base to show where our natural assets are, and where the potential for securing further natural assets is going to be, before we get houses built all over every single bit of green space in our area. I mean, is there, what sort of, do we have any leverage in preparation of that? Because things seem to be moving quite fast. I think it's all been speeded through because of the political cycle.
Yes, I was just checking to see if Michael Gove was still in place after the reshuffle, but it looks like he is. All local planning authorities, biodiversity and ecology officers are talking to each other around how we align BNG, because we're aware that obviously we all have BNG responsibilities, and we need to make sure they're all complementary, because obviously nature doesn't respect our political boundaries. So we're already having those conversations to align, and a lot of our interim policies are actually quite similar, because for that very reason, and we are keeping that cooperation going as much as we can. And it's very welcome that LPAs that previously did not have ecology support in place are in the process of putting that support in, because again, the more resource there is to help with this, the better our overall delivery will be. I fully take your point about having to manage the expectations around infrastructure developments and also around future planning ambitions against making sure we actually have a decent environment. And we have to just be aware of that and try and get as much advantage as we can over the information we have available. It's just quite frustrating, and I don't think I'm breaking any confidence when I say that Natural England colleagues have also found this quite frustrating, and Planning Advisory Service colleagues, that different bits of DEFRA seem to move to different timetables. So we're kind of very dependent on them. Yet on the same time, we have to manage expectations from DLUC. So it's an awkward situation, but it's one we are aware of and one we have to try and operate inside.
Thank you very much, Lara.
Yeah, I think despite the very frustrating rolling back of biodiversity deadlines that the government seems to be making, the one thing we can do in our region to protect ourselves in this area um, is to help that ecology field in our region. So I suppose this goes back to the budget bit I talked about at our last meeting, that as a combined authority, we could be focusing some skills attention on the development of ecologists in our area straight out of university with peers across the region to be able to support each other, because they will become like gold dust in the years to come, and they're very important for our region.
They are already gold dust, and we, some time ago advertised 2 posts and didn't get any applications at all. I think we've resolved that now because we're in a slightly different situation. But yes, but they are like gold dust. Councillor Elsie.
Thank you, Chair. Some of what I was going to say, you very kindly covered for me. And in relation to what Quentin said, as a developer who is now trying to build care facilities in an area which is covered by nutrient neutrality, I understand and sympathise with the frustrations of dealing with Natural England, because the way they've dealt with nutrient neutrality is a complete shower of something. What I would like to say on this is that I'm really supportive of this, and I welcome the invitation for supporting authorities to join the steering group. But I am really concerned about the tight timeline to deliver this work, allowing for adequate time for consultation and sign off by partner authorities. Therefore, it's stating the bleeding obvious, really, but I would like to encourage that we have a really strong project management and robust project management team, and a very clear delivery plan in order to communicate deliverability and to retain the support from the project partners.
Thank you. So point well made. So so our team is here. This is it. We are a small organisation. So I think so. I'm going to come to Adrian. So it's imperative, isn't it, that we're working with our partner, our partners, because actually they're going to be able to resource a lot of this work, which we simply don't have capacity within this organisation. Do you think we're doing that well enough, or should we be kind of devolving more of the workload to those ecology officers within our partners?
So I'll come in first, and Quinton may want to add to this. So we are very closely engaged with the relevant specialists where we have them across the public sector, but also a key part of us taking it forward is we've got Natural Cambridgeshire leading some of the stakeholder work, which then means we're into all of their network as well. So I think we have a really strong basis of that engagement. The timetable is quick on this, which I think is a challenge, but also an opportunity, because I think we've heard we do want to get this in place to start making a difference. So we will be sadly putting some more pressure on some of your officers to help us, engage with this to get it over the line.
Fine, thank you. So it's important to all of us. So if there's any issues, then you must come to us individually. I have every confidence that we've got the strong project management within this organisation, because this is a priority. But it's something this committee needs to keep a close eye on, the speed at which it happens. And it's extremely galling that it's actually government's guidelines that have held us up when actually we've been ready to go for quite a while, haven't we? Really. But hey ho. Did I see Councillor Dupre's hand? And then the Mayor.
Just very briefly, the requirement to take account of the LNRS in local plans. Local plans across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough are in various stages of preparation and updating, and various stages of currency and antiquity, which presumably means there will be a rather patchwork approach of having to take account of the LNRS, and I wondered whether that presented any issues for the system collectively.
Adrian?
So yes, that's a fact that there are different speeds of which authorities are at in terms of where they happen to be on the cycle of local plan review. We've talked about the overlap with the BNG guidance, and I know a number of authorities have already put out specific advice around biodiversity net gain. So there's an opportunity, if they felt that a local plan review was some time off, is to sort of pick up as a single planning document some issues coming out of the LNRS. Obviously, we're keen to get that into implementation, so we would be hoping that authorities do align as soon as possible. They are, obviously a regular thing to update in terms of local plans. So we will work the best we can. So there may be ways in which the gap could be filled until a formal review of a local plan comes along.
Thank you. Quinton, you want to come in?
Yes, Councillor Bray is correct. As his agent said, everyone's at different stages. However, one lesson from the pilot LNRS projects that was learned is it's very important to get a balance in this document between it being a nature-driven document and a planning policy appropriate document. So that was one of the key messages that came out, which is why, for example, we've engaged the services of an author, in this case land use consultants, to ensure that consistency and applicability. And Adrian referred to various specialist groups we're going to be drawing upon, and one of those is on planning policy. So we're planning on using the existing planning policy forum that is already in Cambridge and Peterborough to get the specialist input from those policy planners as to how this document will best reflect their own individual circumstances and stages of local plan development and anticipated direction. So to make sure we get that right.
Thank you. Just before I bring the Mayor in, can I just ask a question? So does the LNRS get kind of signed off by someone in government in the same way that planning?
Yes.
Okay, so it could be rejected.
Secretary of State.
So if we don't get, so if the balance is seen to be wrong, perhaps by a Secretary of State who's more who leans more to development than nature.
This is where the supporting authorities are very important, because they have two opportunities to review and comment on the emerging on the strategy, including the final version of it. So it goes to the Secretary of State with hopefully with the full support and endorsement of the supporting authorities. The Secretary of State then signs it off, assuming it meets the stated minimum criteria as set out by the Environment Act. But yeah, it has to go through those processes. But those processes aren't included in the timescale for development. Effectively, what's in our timetable is to get it to the point where we send it to the Secretary of State, not for them to, and we can use it while it's with them. It's just it goes through that formal sign-off process by the Secretary of State for the Environment.
Thank you. Yes, and someone whose local plan took 4.5 years to be determined by the planning inspector once it'd been submitted. Yeah, that's really interesting. Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to Adrian as the officer for bringing the paper and for sort of the narrative on the work that's been done. Obviously, share the comments made around the committee about frustration at sort of being held back by forces which we don't necessarily have control over. And I also want to say thank you for the relative brevity and sort of understandable nature of how it's presented. But it is really a challenge back to you, and I do this, and also maybe to Quintin, if he wants to come in, that in point 7.1, which is under public health implications, and I speak as a mayor who has said very clearly within the combined authority there's a priority about addressing health inequalities. Are there really no implications in terms of improvements in public health by having an LNRS? I actually beg to disagree, and I suspect that may be need to be reconsidered in a further paper. But it's a challenge back to you as an officer, and also I'd be interested to hear from Quintin as well.
Thank you. And I think that's something for wider debate if we have this workshop. That's absolutely something we need to be discussing. Adrian, first, please.
Yeah, I'll hold my hand up on that one because I think in previous times when we reported, we've expressed quite a lot under that for the implications in terms of people's mental health and access to nature and the environment. So I think that's slipped through my editing in terms of I think that's the standard response if you put nothing in. So, but yes, we have reported that very strong link before, and that was particularly highlighted obviously during COVID. There is always a balance in some cases to making sure that the impact of people enjoying nature doesn't damage specific habitats. But that's why one of the themes in the strategy is actually an urban theme as well. So we've picked up that we need to look at all the different opportunities for people to engage with nature. So yes, take that point.
Thank you. Quintin, did you want to add anything to that?
And I agree fully with Adrian's comments. I think there are beneficial implications for public health if we get it right.
Thank you. Yes, certainly walking the dog in the countryside is the only thing that's keeping me sane at the moment. So thank you very much indeed, everyone. That was a really interesting debate. So we're just asked to note the report, which we've done. Don't need a vote. So item 8 now is the climate projects update. Steve, are you is Adrian leading on this again? Thank you, Adrian. Do you want to give a summary?
I'm afraid you got me again. So this is bringing the committee up to speed on a whole range of projects that came forward as specific funding pots via the board. There's I've gone through each, and you can see that on some we've made some very good progress, some not so much, and a couple where we've got issues that I want to bring to your attention. Just to highlight those that have decisions against them. So the first one is there was an allocation for um, some revenue money to support the community in terms of moving towards more sustainable land use farming opportunities. And we've reported that to the June committee. So having discussed with the sector and partners, it was clear that there is still an appetite for that advice, but there is a great opportunity to link it to the previous item we've just discussed in terms of local nature recovery. And basically to support the central government funding we get with more activity through this. So there's three proposals there that are all linked, which is that we would use that funding to first support the work that Natural Cambridgeshire has been doing on a biodiversity net gain register. So we've talked about biodiversity net gain. At the moment, I would say it's pretty much like the Wild West out there, and that there's lots of people potentially with opportunities or think they have opportunities to sell biodiversity net gain credits. There's lots of developers trying to understand the system and to get best value for their interests. And as of yet, is a very immature market. So one of the things that Natural Cambridge has been looking at is actually trying to do a bit of brokerage between those who have opportunities in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough and those who might be looking to, where they can't do it on their own site, look to basically buy some biodiversity credits. So I think that's a really worthwhile opportunity to sort of help us get ahead in terms of that process. The second one is around assistance to farmers in accessing the fund for nature. So we've heard we've got three good, strong proposals that we're working through that Natural Cambridgeshire have done. There were a number of others where people applied and there was more development work to do to get to the stage of accessing the fund. And so there's an opportunity to put some support in to actually bring that forward. And finally, around landscape scale actions, we have a number of localities where there's some really strong clusters of landowners who are looking at the challenges for their area. But in other parts of our patch, that hasn't happened. So I think there's an opportunity to learn lessons from the strength of, for example, the Cambridge Nature Network. And I know there's been discussions about a similar network in Finland to support that to come forward. So that's about using that budget to that end. Would you like me to go through the other topics, or do you want to do it? Would you like to talk
Well, I
on
think,
each?
can I assume everybody's read the report? Shall we just ask questions on them rather than make you go the whole way through them? Is that okay? Councillor Elsley.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair, and through you. My question relates to 2.3, and I declare a bit of an interest in here as I provide care homes for early onset neurological presentations, but equally with this portfolio, PCC don't have any projects funded within this stream. Could the combined authority provide me with a list detailing which care homes have expressed an interest, and would the combined authority support PCC officers in undertaking further engagement to encourage local participation? PCC did suggest at an earlier stage that funding should be allocated to allow care homes to commission the production of decarbonisation plan for their sites to inform bids for capital works. Could this be explored again?
Thank you. So my understanding is there was a really poor uptake on this, and I think we've gone out again, haven't we, Adrian? And I think we're about to have another stab, aren't we? So would you like to respond to that?
Yes, happy. I'd actually stopped under sustainable land use, so I did have some comments on those other bits. So I'll pick those up now, if I may, as well as answering that question. So yes, I'd like to introduce Martin Lutman, who is sat over there on the desk because I think he was using it as his rest for his laptop. But he's the program manager of this, and he has been out talking to care homes. So we did an expression of interest round, and there were 10 expressions of interest that came in. Now we have focused it on independent care homes as those identified as most in need of that support, and we have a limited take up, a limited response to this program, which is a real shame because it is a very supported grant program. It does require match funding because care homes are businesses, so that's how we pitched it. So Martin has been out and he's offered conversations with all of those who've expressed expressions of interest to work through any issues. We've got a very simple application form, but we have been finding, you know, independent care home operators are not necessarily used to applying for local government funding. So obviously, initially there was some suspicion about free money and what was this all about. So we have been working really hard, but as you can see from the report, we are going to be underspent on this program unless we can attract more interest. So we are doing another push around that. But what I've suggested is, if that doesn't bring anything more forward, we will come back and the committee can decide how you want to change the program, whether you want to broaden the criteria or whether it's redeployed onto something else. So that would be in January cycle. But we're certainly happy to take comments now in terms of what else we can do around that. And we have been working quite hard with operators. I've also noticed, obviously, I'm not very good with dates, but in the recommendation, I've said extend it to December 24, where it already goes beyond there. It should be December 25 in terms of allowing us the time to deliver.
Thanks, Adrian. The motivation for this came very much from county, I know. Are we utilising, our partners' officers as much as we should? I mean, particularly Peterborough and the county. Are we utilising them to promote this as well as ourselves?
Yeah, so in terms of who to go to, we've engaged with the care leads in both those authorities and the care commission to enable us to get a foot in the door in terms of bypassing a random email coming in or a letter. So we have been engaging with those officers.
Yeah.
I didn't pick up your revenue point, so it's a capital program. So we're really constrained on what we can do in terms of supporting people building up exactly what you said, what they need. But we have been talking to the hub in terms of whether there are any opportunities through the new rounds of funding to support that. But that is a challenge of the way the program initially was set up. It was a capital only pot.
Yes. Do you want to come back on that point, and then I'll come to Councillor?
Thank you. Adrian, could I suggest that perhaps we widen the net to not just be communicating with health professionals in local authorities, and actually be communicating with the officers responsible for environment projects, because we all know that our health colleagues are extremely busy in trying to deliver their own projects at the moment, and finding placements for people will be far more up their agenda than finding ways to reduce the carbon footprint. So could I suggest that we have a two-pronged attack, and then the lead members within those authorities can bang heads together to make sure that we get the outcomes we're looking for.
And actually add to that economic development officers as well. So I have a newsletter that goes out to thousands of businesses every month. So we could put in that as well. I'll take Councillor Dupre's comment, then I'll come back to you, Adrian.
I'd like to agree with what's just been said on that point, but looking at the report, it suggests that out of 32 eligible, it says, not just suggests, that out of 32 eligible care homes, this has resulted in only one formal application, which is extremely disappointing. And I wondered how far we had an understanding of what the barriers are to uptake, firstly from the 32 down to the 10 that expressed interest, what was putting off the 22, and then what was putting off the 9 out of the 10 who have not so far progressed to formal application. And those may be different things. It may be financial considerations, it may be and uncertainty about the revenue impact into the longer term. It may be just general suspicion about free money, as has been suggested. It might be a concern about the complexity of project managing all of this and how that happens, and also potentially about the disruption while work is done on retrofit as well. But there may be other reasons as well. And I was just wondering how far we'd actually mined down into that sort of fairly relationship type stuff to be able to understand what's putting people off at each of those two stages.
I think you've done quite a lot, haven't you? So
Yeah, I mean, if Martin wants to come in and add anything to this, but we, in terms of some of the initial challenges are around finances, in that some care homes had ideas where they were going to invest in their buildings, but not for several years, and so even with the opportunities of essentially 50% grant towards costs, they weren't financially in that position where they had that. I think covered some of the other challenges, but certainly Martin has been speaking to all of those who expressed an interest to encourage them and talk them through any barriers. So, we've drawn from the previous experience of another funding scheme and made it a really simple, as much as it can be, application form, but we do need due diligence. And so, but we're trying to take, given the small numbers involved, a very personal conversation around that. So trying to identify whether there are any things from our side that might be putting people off. But I think it's more wider challenges. In terms of the revenue aspect of, I think generally there's still a good appreciation of, they know what's wrong with their buildings. They may not know exactly the environmental solution to that, but I think they do have a good grasp. So it's more about some of those other aspects.
So speaking as an ex-fundraiser, what I see the problem being is that this isn't a needs-led scheme. You know, we think there's a need, but they haven't told us there's a need. So, you know, the schemes that I've been involved with have failed are the ones where I've had a marvelous idea, have got a load of money, and then there's been no uptake because actually my starting point hasn't been people saying to me, we want a skate park or we want a new community building, because then it's needs led and then you take them with you and it's already there. Whereas, you know, I think the reason why when we first decided on this, I wasn't that happy with it, was that I saw it as very top down. So I think, you know, we're going to have to get to the point sooner rather than later where we decide that, you know, it was a great idea, but actually it wasn't the right idea because we hadn't actually, it was a solution that actually we hadn't identified the problem for. So I think you're taking the right approach. So we're going to give it another shot. But I think after this next shot, we're going to have to then, you know, have a rethink and say, okay, it was a great, you know, we thought it was a great idea, but actually there's not the uptake because there is not the demonstrable need. Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Yes, Adrian, in your report, you outline lots of different projects, and I think this highlights just how difficult reaching a just transition is. We're going to have to be prepared that we're going to hit some ideas that don't work or are not successful, and learn our lessons and move on. That might be the case in some of these projects. But my question is about City Portrait 2.12. And so I see that this project is complete now. Some of the data is very fascinating. But as a combined authority with a project that we funded in one constituent authority, are we able to learn things from it that can be applied across the region now that the project is done?
Yeah, so when we had the original budget bids, it was very much suggestions from authorities as well as some from within the combined authority. And that was a very specific one that came forward in terms of Cambridge City looking at that data. So we will be looking at the outcome of that and what benefits and sharing that around in terms of lessons learned. We're not currently thinking that we would fund any further activity of the same nature through that process. But yeah, each of our projects we do need to review to see the impact and how that feeds back into future work.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's just to follow on from Laura's comment and Adrian's response. I look back on the list of projects here and knowing having been in the post for 2.5 years, I recognise these as sort of the proposals that came in the first attempt when I had first came into the role as a mayor, and it may well be that the approach back then, which was very different to how we are approaching things now through the development of the single assurance framework, has given us this sort of rather potential hodgepodge of ideas that came forward at the time. I kind of look back on it now with a sort of a knowledge of how things have developed and indeed improved at the combined authority. I think there are things on here that we need to consider. I echo, Chair, your concerns, despite the hard work that you've done in trying to engage with local providers of care and in care homes around the retrofit. Your description, I think, nails it. I am pleased to see that the city portrait went through, and I'm obviously hunting to biodiversity. These are examples, as you say, of where they were driven, and I think people down at the sort of source level of the constituent authority, there was a real belief that they could be delivered. I have concerns about the meanwhile funding at the core site in northeast Cambridge. I can see that Logan's Meadows moving on, and that looks something about reassurance. And of course, I'm really excited by the opportunity for the Net Zero Villages program. It may well be that capital may well be better assigned into some of these areas in the future, but that's for the board to discover. It's a reflection really of, I think, 2 years ago where the combined authority was when we sort of, and I say I suggested to leaders, what's your ideas? And this is what we got. I think we're in a better place now where working with Adrian, Steve as officers and working within a single assurance framework, things that would be coming forward would possibly be more well considered and indeed would be brought together in a more cohesive way by conversations with authorities rather than a case of let's put a bid in, this is good for our local area. So apologies if they were a little bit of a hodgepodge. I've learnt on the job a bit, and I'm pleased that where they have completed, it's great. But I think there are some things that we've got to pick up here and tidy up around the edges. Thank you.
So I completely agree, and we are a much more mature organisation now, and I think having a fairly sort of in-depth look at what we've got is required, and a reassessment of what our priorities are. If I can just ask, on recommendation 1, which is about the sustainable land use, the advice to farmers on accessing the Fund for Nature. I mean, are we doing that all through the NFU? Because that does seem to be the obvious channel for liaising with farmers.
So one of the I think I'm right. One of the trustees of Natural Cambridgeshire is representative of a farming organisation, and there is a farmer on the trustees as well. So, in terms of expertise linking in, and yes, we do engage with NFU and CLA and the other relevant bodies. Also, you'll recall we fund Fenland farmers as well, so we have another route in across this. So yes, we do engage with the farmer representatives.
Okay, I'm just really keen that we avoid being responsible for stuff when actually by passporting down the work to other organizations who are already in the field, it relieves some of the pressure on us, and actually they probably do it better than we do. Is that the model that we're generally using?
So yeah, I mean that's why the Fund for Nature is delivered by Natural Cambridgeshire, because they've got all the experts around it, and we've got a very sort of religious governance on that. And in using this money in terms of supporting the farming groups, that's about empowering those areas to come together themselves, have a voice, and to develop. Because we're very conscious that a lot of the nature gains will be through how people change how they manage their land. And so that's really important that that has to come from them. And there is quite a lot of appetite amongst farmers to have not wholesale change of their farming approach, but to encompass more sustainable nature elements onto their farm.
Yeah, and they are the most important custodians of our land. So,
Yeah.
Okay, so if there's no more questions, we'll move on to the recommendations, which are on page 23. So we've got the one about the Sustainable Land Use Advice Programme, then B is about extending delivery for the Care Homes Retrofit Programme. I'd like this to come back in January for us to, make a final decision about whether it's actually viable or not. Extend the Doubling Nature Metrics Survey Programme to January and note progress. I would quite like a report to come back in the new year on the progress on the chalk streams, the joint chalk streams work. I think we'd all be interested in because that's a 3-year project, isn't it? So, but it would be nice to have a sort of interim report on where they've got to with that. Members okay with that? Right here. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, we need to be hearing about how these projects are going, apart from anything, so we can celebrate the success and we can promote the success and share the best practice as well. So thank you. All right. Okay. Yes. Sorry. That's right. Let's go back to the recommendations here. Right, so B is to extend the delivery period for the Care Homes Retrofit Programme to December 2025, but actually say brackets with a full review in January 25, subject to a full review in January 24. Don't know what year it is. Okay, all right, jolly good. All right, so are we? These are recommendations. So I'm happy to propose these. Do I have a seconder? Mayor, thank you. We'll now move to the vote. Are you all in agreement with the recommendations? Anybody wish to vote against? Anyone wish to abstain? So the recommendations are approved by general consensus. Thank you very much. And moving swiftly on to item 9, which is the Affordable Housing Programme. And we've got Asma online. Hi, Asma.
Hello, sorry I couldn't be there. I've sprained my ankle last night and can't really use it to drive
Oh,
in.
you poor thing. I hope it wasn't trundling around a building site.
Oh, no, fortunately not. But tripping over my husband's slippers was not really what I had planned last night.
Oh, dear. Poor
I landed
you.
awkwardly.
Oh, well, I hope
So,
it recovers very soon.
yeah, I do apologise for not being there. Normally I would be in attendance. Hello, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to the Environment and Sustainable Communities meeting today. Just to give you a note, this is a noted report just for information only on the current affordable housing programme. At the time of writing the report, there were 777 units completed. It was in October, and I have expected that there have been a few more completions. I believe some of the units at Lara Homes have been completed, and I believe some of the ones at the big Alconbury site with ManGPN are also at near completion. So that figure 777 might be a bit slightly higher. I've also been informed that the Halo project with Keepmoat site, all 30 units have been completed as shared ownership products in the PCC area. So that's good news to hear. Girton also finished in the end of September with the installation of new windows. So I'm really proud with that because that's one of our community-led housing projects. So I'm pleased to say that's now fully complete. All the units are done there. We have some progress on some of the CK homes sites. However, there have been issues with roadworks and some snagging issues, which has caused delay of handover. We still have those issues of disputes with Cross Key Homes at the sites at British Sugar Way. They will be sorted out shortly. Also looking forward with Halo sites, with Allison Homes and Keepmoat site, they are proceeding quite well. Sales have seemed to have been increased in an uptake, so that's been steady and improving. And I've just had confirmation from Halo that they're looking to work with Vistry in the near future, because obviously they've just merged with Countryside, and therefore there was a little bit of a stoppage between having the Vistry sites that they had with Halo proceeding any further, but that's now opened up channels and that's proceeding quite well. And there goes my update. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Gosh, the things have suddenly moved at pace, haven't they? That's really well done to you. Any questions? No. So Asma, we've got Councillor Elsie's just joined us on the committee. Would you like just to go through on the loans? Obviously, money comes back in from the loans, and I think we currently have to have sort of government approval, don't we, for reallocation of that. What's the current situation with what those receipts that we get? How can we use them these days? Or is that a better one for Steve? Or have we got that later on? Oh, it's the next item. Okay,
It
ignore
is the
that.
next
Ignore that.
next
Marvellous.
item with Nick.
Right, that's fine. Thank you. Jolly good. So if there's no questions, I think this is for noting and well done. You're nearly there, aren't you?
I am,
No-
and obviously I was hoping to go out to the bigger sites such as Northminster and Wisbeach Road March, but unfortunately that's put a kibosh on it this week because my car's out of action as well.
Your car and
So
your foot. You're not doing well, are
yes,
you?
I'm not
Okay.
doing very well this week.
Oh, all right. Well, as I say, take your yes. Very soon you'll be able to hang your wellies up. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank
So
you.
having preempted item 10, which is the housing loans update, so we're coming to Nick for that one. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Chair. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Nick Sweeney. I'm the Residential Development Manager. The Combined Authorities Housing Strategy of 2018 divided the Affordable Housing Programme funding into two pots. £60 million was allocated for traditional grant funding, and £40 million was to be used for the then Mayor's plan for a revolving fund to support the delivery of additional affordable housing. The revolving fund was used to provide 5 loans to development companies as detailed in the table at Appendix A. The paper before members states that one loan has yet to be repaid, and this loan was made to Histon Road Development Limited Liability Partnership. I'm very pleased to confirm that the final payment for this loan and the interest was received on Friday, the 10th of November. This means that all the affordable housing programme loans issued to developers have now been repaid. I would add that in March 2023, the former Housing and Communities Committee were informed that an initial internal review was planned to look into the governance and processes followed in agreeing and managing loan terms between the combined authority and private housing developers. This review has yet to take place, but preparatory meetings have been arranged to commence the process. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So when do we expect that review to take place? Because I think it was asked for. It's quite a while ago, wasn't it?
A meeting is planned with the Assistant Director of Finance for tomorrow. Obviously, we can't undertake a review into our own activities. And so we're meeting with them tomorrow. Now that we were waiting for all of the loans to be repaid
Yes.
before we could commence
Okay.
the review. Now we're meeting with the Assistant Director tomorrow, and we'll do everything we can to cooperate with how he aims to undertake the review.
Okay, fine. It rests with him then to make that decision. Okay, it would just be good to get that out of the way, wouldn't it? I think it's. Your comment, Steve.
Yeah, just to say, we'll push that ahead as quickly as we can and support the work that's going to be managed by the finance colleagues. It's been a long time coming, but we did say and reported previously that let's get the housing loan program finished, sorted, and then carry out the review, and that's the intention now.
Thank you. Just want to talk about what happens to the money that comes back in, where it goes.
That's going to fund the grants, our grant commitments to the work that is being undertaken by ASMA. So that was a condition of the 2021-22 programme.
That's fine. So having been loans, it's now metamorphed into grants.
That's correct. The government insisted that it was used to fund the remaining elements of the programme.
Jolly good. And are we still in the position of needing government oversight before any new grants are approved, or do we have autonomy over that now?
My understanding is that we won't have any more ability to undertake a new program until we get some more funding, perhaps through a new Devo deal.
Thank you.
Nick's quite correct. There's an item later on the agenda where we're seeking to reallocate funding. Government have said it's over now to you to manage the programme, so they're not seeking to get involved in any future decisions on how we manage the programme.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to say, thank Nick for the report and really welcome that the final repayment and the loan from the Lara site come to its in Arbury ward, which I represent in Cambridge City Council. So that's really welcome news. And I know I expressed before my concerns about delays on that site. So I'm glad there's been a bit of progress. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Any more questions? Mayor.
There's one thing which probably goes back to the point you were making about the process of a review of the internal review. It's one actually Councillor Dupre may well be aware of as well. In the past, I know that I had raised concerns about documents that had been produced to help with developments around the area, and they had sort of mayoral office sign off. This was with particular regard to community land trusts in Streatham and Wilburton, and it's just a kind of it's something that I have, dare I say, I have been asking questions about since I was 2 weeks into being a mayor. So I am incredibly frustrated, but I understand the process as to why this has taken so long. But I'm really hopeful that that particular document and other documents that were drawn up at the time by a previous administration are being looked at to in part of this investigation. For I was not happy for them to be going out and representing mayoral office views, and I am pleased that they have, as I understand, have been withdrawn from a formal planning process. But the fact that they were ever pulled together gave me great cause for concern from literally 2 weeks into the role as a mayor. If that could be noted, please.
Yes, thank you. Will be. Councillor Dupre.
Just want to add my total support to that. This was also something that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee was trying to get to grips with when I was chairing it, and that was also not forthcoming either. And I do think we need to have a look at that and really understand what happened there and why.
Thank you. That is noted. All right. So if that's everything on that, again, we've been asked to note the housing loans update, which we've done, and we'll now move on to the GSE Net Zero Hub board decisions. And I think we've got Maxine. How nice. Hello, Maxine. Jolly good. Good morning. Okay. Jolly good.
Okay, thank you. In July, the Combined Authority Board delegated authority to the Executive Director of Resources and Performance to make decisions on behalf of the Combined Authority when sitting on the Net Zero Hub boards. And my report today just outlines the decisions that have been made since July by the Hub board. And just to give an overview, we have allocated just under £67,000 to support projects with external technical consultancy to enable bids into the latest round of the public sector decarbonisation fund. Those projects were on our shortlist and they're detailed in the report. We also allocated just under £450,000 of technical consultancy to support the acceleration of the net zero shortlist projects. And that's about getting projects to investment case and particularly to secure commercial investments. It's one of our key objectives from the Department of Energy Security and net zero. We also formally established the Greater Southeast Regional Training Network. That network has been allocated £150,000 of pump priming. It covers all of our geography with representation from sort of skills leads. It also includes employer networks. We've got the Retrofit Academy sort of working on that, bringing together some research. The aim of that is to really start to develop the soft infrastructure that we all know that we need for the green retrofit skills agenda. The Hub board also agreed to administering a £2 million community energy fund. It's a £10 million fund across England, £2 million being allocated to each hub. This builds on the success of the Rural Community Energy Fund, but this also allows for projects in urban areas to be able to apply to the fund. We're just waiting for our final MOU, and then the fund will be able to formally launch. We have also agreed to fund some regional skills pilots. This is funding from the Department of Energy Security Net Zero, specifically around linking local identified need with training providers and skills offers. We've shortlisted 3 projects, and we are now sort of currently trying to negotiate additional funding from the department to fund 5 projects. Again, we have a draft MOU, but we haven't got anything finalised yet. And finally, we agreed an interim net zero board terms of reference. And this is to align with our new MOUs, but also the transition of the LEP functions into local authorities. So we will have a new governance framework, new terms of reference being adopted by the board and by the end of March. So in readiness for April when those LEPs are no longer in the functions they are now. So that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So there's a really nice level of detail in this paper, so thank you very much for that. You seem to be trying to get a sort of fair geographic spread of awards. Is that luck or intentional?
It's really those that are coming to us to ask for support. We are now expanding the team, so we've got new account managers going into different areas to re-engage, and also the department is looking at a change of tact as well. So we're going to be employing a strategic stakeholder manager. So that's really about starting to identify sort of priorities in geographical areas, but also areas where we can look to accelerate project delivery, attract commercial investment, use those as examples and case studies, support other areas, but also to support those areas. And we have done a lot of this that don't have any internal capacity and haven't really been doing much. So most of our efforts are focused on those authorities, but we do want to make sure that we are sort of servicing the needs across our geography. You'll be aware it's large. We've got over 140 local authorities on patch. So expanding the team is helping with that.
Thank you very much. That's good to hear, because I mean the way the government's so wedded on grant programs, and it's deeply unfair on councils that don't have the capacity, and the ones who are smart at it get all the dosh. Okay, any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Maxine. There's a lot of really exciting things in this report that I'm looking forward to, especially the Community Energy Fund. I'm wondering, once you finally do have the green light, whether all the members could be sent a reminder about that to take back to our constituent areas. I know lots of parish council meetings that I visit, they'd love to do things in wind energy and community-owned energy, and this might be the vehicle for them to be able to do that. And also the funding that the board has given out recently has given me a lot of ideas. So I'm hoping people in our region will take up similar things. I see Cherwell District Council has received £30,000 towards their fleet decarbonisation, and I know that's something that we all struggle with and think about, our fleet and decarbonisation. So any opportunities that you see arising, I think it would be really helpful for us to help you disseminate out to our authorities.
So the issue is that we're not actually part of the hub. We know the combined authority runs it, but our constituent authorities are not part of this hub.
Yes, just to clarify, the hub does a lot more than retrofit, and I think a lot of the combined authority board sessions have been focused on the retrofit schemes that we've delivered that have challenges. For the retrofit schemes, Cambridgeshire authorities deliver their own. So that's one exception, but for the other programs, all local authorities are open to our services.
My misunderstanding. Thank you very much indeed. So thank you for your question. Good. There's such a lot to take in. Okay, any other questions? Mayor.
Thank you, Maxine. it is a very positive report, and as you read through it, the work that you and your team are doing, it should be highlighted as a sort of exemplar. But I admire your sort of your sort of honesty and integrity about mentioning that in the past, obviously, we were being criticised around the retrofit and all the challenges. I'm also aware that, speaking to many other mayoral colleagues, that retrofitting has been a real challenge in terms of delivery for the whole of the United Kingdom. It's really a question. By being open and transparent from the start, how has this sort of played into the narrative now that we are in, as with other areas around the combined authority, on a trajectory of improvement? Do you think there is some sort of positives that can be drawn out of our previous positioning, although it was one of frustration? And how do you see in the conversations with government going forward where we sit in terms of the work that you do, and how we then will be able to deliver not just for our own area but for the whole of Greater Southeast?
To make, to be honest, about where we were on delivery and what our key challenges were. We know that a lot of other areas across the country didn't put their position clearly to government until it came to the closeout of the programme. So as we got to the last 3 months or so of the programme, it became apparent across government that actually it wasn't just the southeast that were having issues, it was across the country. So I think it was the right thing to do. And when we started sustainable warmth, I think we had a red rag rating for probably the first meeting. We soon moved into amber, and I think we've got that trust with the government. Is we are honest, we tell you the truth, we tell you where the issues are, and we're trying to to use that to influence the shaping of future programs. At the moment, I don't think that's really having an impact, and I think local authorities across the country also feel that actually we're not being listened to in terms of the shaping of the future retrofit funding schemes, which are getting incredibly complex to deliver on the ground.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Dupre.
Coming back to the community energy, I agree with Lara that there's huge interest from parishes in this and wanting to be able to do their own stuff, and there are some great exemplars out there. The danger is that this is the focus on community energy is something that is going to be there at every single tier of our multi-layered tiers of local government, where there's the money from the hub, there's the strategy, the policy, and the oncoming strategy from the county council on this. District councils are promoting it, parish councils trying to do things for themselves. How are we going to present a really united, seamless front to residents, to parish councils, to community groups who want to run with this thing? How are we going to make it look like a single front door and something that actually is joined up across all of that system?
Thank you. Good question.
Yeah, I say we would certainly welcome local authority officers referring projects into the hub for a start, so we can do some sort of an initial scoping. One of the things that a lot of community groups come to us is we've got an idea, but we've not really looked into it in any detail. So we do have a community energy officer lead and officer support that can help communities with the initial, triaging, if you like, of the project. We've got things like guidance documents on different types of technologies, approaches, but we have gaps in terms of we don't really link into governance, supporting community groups in building a good governance structure, and that's a real gap and a weakness that we've seen in the delivery of the Rural Community Energy Fund. Is a lot of those projects, it wasn't that it was a good idea, but they didn't actually have that strong governance or strong local authority support. It is the government's intention that perhaps things like SPF can then support future development of community projects, but that this funding acts as that initial feasibility for the scoping of the ideas and the technical viability, and then those development grants to really get them to the point of being able to get planning permission and go out for investment. These projects all work so much better with the support of the local authority, so would welcome the opportunity in terms of how we can engage better to support.
Yeah, do you come back?
Just to follow up, there are various references in today's papers about the websites how far is it possible to derive a web presence which actually covers all of that and makes it look united with various pointers to various organizations and structures that do different bits of the process, whether it's like financial planning or governance or all the technical stuff. Is there room for within the web system of the combined authority or elsewhere, somewhere where we can present that kind of portal to go to?
Thank you. So we're already producing a new website that will do just this. Hopefully, do you want to come in, Maxine?
Yes, I'll certainly go back to the comms team within the combined authority to see what we can do in terms of linking that together.
Thank you. And yes,
Just in response to Councillor Dupre, so last month, Maxine and yourself and I were all at the Action on Energy conference, and I think that has been one way of pulling together the domestic retrofit question that you've raised. What we need is something similar, but that is for community energy. And so I'm wondering if actually maybe the Combined Authority website is not necessarily the correct platform. It might be something very similar to Action on Energy, the way we tackle domestic retrofit.
thank you. If there's no more questions, so the report recommendations are to note the report, which we've done. Thank you very much indeed. Look forward to seeing you again soon. Item 10 is the climate partnership update. So I think we've got Adrian back, haven't we, for this one?
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry, I'm back again. It's a verbal update to pick up both the partnership meeting but also the climate summit last week to give you a flavour. I know a number of you were able to attend that event. So just on the climate partnership, which as you'll recall is chaired by the Mayor and brings together a whole range of organisations along with local government to take forward our climate action plan. So it met. The first thing it did was actually celebrate a piece of success, which was the extension of the university's support for its own bus service to become all fully electric, which adds another 9 buses to the 30 that we've got in the area as part of our progress towards moving the public transport system to be much more climate friendly. It had a presentation from Nathan Veer from the Pan Regional Partnership and about how we can work together to coordinate activity. It discussed funding opportunities, which we fed in to thinking, excuse me, thinking around the potential for a climate program budget going forward, which I know we'll come back to discuss in terms of the board later this month. We had a discussion around locally determined contributions, which I think partly goes back to the comment raised by earlier in terms of carbon budget and overall emissions, and how do we as an area come to a clear view on what our target is collectively. So that was a really interesting piece of work that we'll come back to you as that develops. We heard from the business board that they had a climate workshop and are very interested in strengthening the links between what they're considering and the climate agenda. And I think that's a great opportunity for us to pick that up with the business board. Unfortunately, we don't have a business board rep here today. And then we discussed the climate summit agenda, which obviously we had last week, over 100 people at Ely Maltings, and more people had to listen to me speak as I picked up one of the agenda items, but we did have a really interesting agenda, I hope, for those who were there. We covered future fens, we covered retrofit, we covered how we're going to roll out charging for electric vehicles and not to the detriment of communities. Soils and farming issues came up, a really fascinating discussion around insect protein, which was something that I hadn't really thought we would be getting onto, but it was fascinating about opportunities for different ways of meeting the demand that we have going forward. And we also highlighted the letter that we'd received from the Cambridgeshire Youth Group in terms of their climate aspirations, which we'll be following up in terms of how we can continue that engagement. And I think others may have views on the event. What we will be doing is picking up on the ideas that were raised, and there's quite a lot that came out in the discussion. We'll be thinking about future engagement. So where do we go from this in terms of building on that re-energizing that we've had around those climate issues? And some of the thoughts, as I said, will feed into potentially your discussion later in terms of climate budget and what you think are priorities for a future programme.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Adrian on that? Yes.
I wanted to touch on the engagement and communication within the partnership. So I've received an email from one of the members of the partnership and environmental group, and they were reminding me about when the commission originally had their recommendations for the combined authority. Some of them were around encouraging engagement on climate action and environmental issues, and that one of the early aims of the partnership was how do we do that, and trying to answer that question together is how does the combined authority engage and communicate better. I feel like some of that has perhaps dropped down our list of priorities, but it's so important. And I'll forward you on the correspondence that they've sent to me. But I think, yeah, so we take a lot of action ourselves as the combined authority, but we need to beef up how we listen to local people and their ideas, bringing them in. And so in events like the event that we had last week, the combined authority did a lot of telling and a lot of talking and guest speakers, but I'm not sure we know what we heard from the people that were there in the room. So what did the combined authority learn from all the people that came to the event? So that's something I'm keen for in the months to come, that in this area of the combined authority that we spend a lot more focus on, especially that the Independent Commission on Climate asked us to specifically have that as an action point, engagement and communication.
Do you want to come back on that?
I'll certainly be keen to see that and to pick that up in terms of that. I think one of the ambitions we've got is that we will be refreshing the climate action plan next year, and as part of that, we have thematic work streams, and it will be really important that we work out how they're going to engage with communities around that. So we'll take that away, and yes. With some small steps. I know it's another website, but actually we don't see it as that in terms of the climate website that we're developing is actually about pulling together activity, and that came very much from the comms leads from our constituent authorities. So we are starting on that route. There's a lot more to do, and we'll certainly take that away and have a discussion about how we can improve that bit and bring it back to you.
Thank you. You shared it with me. There's some really important challenges there, which we have to take seriously. So yeah, so we need to take that offline and have a proper conversation about it. So thank you. Thank you very much for you and all your team for all the work you did on the summit. I know it was a massive amount of work, and it's very gratifying to hear so many people came and that it was such a wide-ranging agenda. So thank you from all of us. Much appreciated. So right, moving on to where are we? 13. Right, the budget. Yes, budget and budget and performance report. So who we got? Got Tim. Tim's online.
Thank you, Chair. Good
Hello,
morning,
Tim.
members.
Hello. Thank you very much indeed.
The report before you today sort of comes in two parts. The first part being the normal budget monitor, which takes into account expenditure up to the end of September. I think really the only real variance there that we can say for definite is the care home refit programme. We're expecting that to be underspent in the current year and probably slip into the next financial year, 24-25. I'll pause there. Were there any questions on the monitor itself?
So we've already decided to have a serious look at that in January, and we've talked quite a lot about it. Are there any questions arising from this paper particularly? Is there anything else you want to pull up, Tim, particularly, apart from that?
No, I mean, obviously there are variances on the net zero hub, but all of those will be either funded by grant or carried forward to fund the programme in future years. The second part of the report, which is the Appendix 1, shows you an updated position for the current medium-term financial plan. So that's the current plan that's been updated for things that we know that have changed. It doesn't at this time include any new or emerging proposals. They will be taken to CA board at the end of this month. There's obviously a long list of those new things that require funding, and decisions on those will be taken by board at the end of November, then in turn brought back to yourselves at your January meeting.
Thank you. Right. Any questions? Councillor Davenport-Ray.
In the MTFS, the revenue line on climate change, I know we discussed that last time, but I think looking forward into the future years, I hope that's really something that we can discuss. Given the scale of the challenge, I don't think that that's showing the level of investment that we need to be considering.
I completely agree with you. Absolutely. So we need to be, feeding that in now. Any other comments? No. Okay. Is there anything else, Steve, that we should be discussing that we've missed?
I don't think so. As Tim's outlined, the draft budget will go to the board at the end of November and then to consultation. The input that we had from members of this committee have been very helpful in helping to shape the thinking going into that. So hopeful there will be at least programmes potentially on climate related issues and priorities that we can look at when that comes through.
Thank you very much indeed. So this item is, well, we've got just noting, right, this item's for noting, so we'll take it as noted, and we'll move on to item 14, which is Environment and Sustainable Community Committee Agenda Plan. Is this you, Steve?
Yep, happy to pick it up, Chair. So the agenda for the January meeting, we've spoken about a couple of items that we want to add to that, so we'll pick that up in looking at the forward plan. Any comments that members have got on what's shown for that meeting or the subsequent one?
Okay, and so we've said we want some sort of workshop where we can kind of just sort of thrash stuff out in a more informal way. Anything else that you want put in there? Yes.
Can I check that? So January, we will receive the quarter 2 KPIs. Is that correct? In the forward agenda, that says quarter 3.
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. So this is for noting. We're now going to have to. We've now got some exempt appendices in the next report, which have been circulated to members separately. I'd like to propose that we refrain from discussing the detail contained within these exempt appendices so that we can remain in public session. Is anyone not happy with that approach? Because in which case we'll move into closed session. We're all happy with it. Okay, right. So just please be mindful of what we can publicly talk about and what we can't. So this is moving on to item 15, the Affordable Housing Programme relocation of funds. And who's leading on? Asma, back to Asma. Hello, Asma again.
Sorry, I think we've just lost Gary Clark. He's just texted me saying he's having issues with his internet access.
Asma, I can't hear you. I don't know if other people can.
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry, I had me speaker moved, but I was just having texts coming from Gary Clark. There he is. He's having some issues with his internet, so I'm hoping that we'll be able to catch any questions if we need to. And Gary Clark from Cross Keys is here as well. I'll present the paper initially. Right, I've got two recommendations on the paper. One is just to note, and one is to approve the reallocation of funds from the garage sites to stand ground. The other one is just to note that the affordable housing programme non-delivery of 4 of the garage sites out of the 6, that which we have lost, and we will receive some properties, but that is all down to planning and redesign at the moment. As it stands at the moment, we have 2 sites currently through with Cross Keys that we're mentioning here. One is stand ground and one is the garage sites. The garage sites will supply 19 bungalows over 6 of the sites, and stand ground was just one major site which was going to provide 26 units with a mix of flats and a number of houses. Both these sites were CKH. Both of them came during the pandemic in 2020 and both got approval. But due to the pandemic, there had been some problems with getting these projects to start as agreed at the time. And they both ended up starting with the contract being signed in April 2022. First grant tranches were then paid out for both the sites. Stand ground had 1,170,000 and the garage sites was 665,000. During the time, the garage sites then ended up having some problems. 4 of the 6 sites, as noted in the report, were not suitable for development. They had very varying different issues, and it has only come to light that only 2 of them will be available for any sort of development on them. Stand ground also suffered some sites due to delays within PCC departments. Party wall issues just took a lot longer to resolve. However, with such delays, this also caused an increase in costs and new building regulations came into force. They had to be taken into consideration on the stand ground site. On reflection, stand ground would have been a full affordable rented site, but due to the extra costs, Cross Keys had approached us saying that they may need to convert some of these houses that they have at stand ground to shared ownership to make it viable. This also caused issues with PCC, and we were in collaboration with them to see if we could assist. PCC also went to its internal body to ask if there was any money that they could assist with keeping the project fully affordable. Unfortunately, they had no monies available. So CKH approached us saying, well, we are not able to proceed with 4 of the garage sites out of the 6. We are going to make half the amount of units that we had promised, and therefore can we use the remaining fund from the garage sites to help make stand ground viable. We had to just make sure that DLUC were happy with that situation. We wrote to them and they were fine with that. They said they didn't have any issues with us proceeding. We have now come to you with CKH here, just in case there are further questions about whether to use the second tranche of money, which would have gone back to DLUC, obviously, if it wasn't used, to be put forward to stand ground to make it affordable. Any other shortfall will be provided by CKH. I therefore come to you to see if I can agree this reallocation of funds from the garage sites to go to stand ground. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a really clear explanation. So it's obviously very sad that we're not getting all the houses we anticipated, but the reality is that the money goes back to government if we don't go with the recommendation here. And the fact that DHLUC have approved the reallocation is something. You know, again, if we don't approve it, I think they'll just have it back, quite honestly. So, you know, this at least allows some affordable housing. So it's kind of absolutely better than the alternative. So, Councillor Elsie, do you want to comment on this because it's Peterborough? Well, no, yeah, of course you are. Of course you are. You're elected member. You can talk. As long as you're not the developer.
All I would really say is that it's disappointing that we are where we are, but we are where we are, and the area in general would really benefit from having completely affordable rented properties rather than shared ownership properties. It doesn't fit for that purpose, really, in my opinion, knowing the area. And the last thing I would want to do would be to see us giving money back to Deluxe. So on the basis of that, then I would ask the colleagues around the table to support it so that we can deliver completely affordable rented properties in an area that desperately needs it.
Thank you. A comment from anyone else? Yes.
Yeah, just to support what's just been said, I mean, in terms of the reputational issue to the combined authority, it's very important we don't return funds to the government. So totally support the proposal in this paper.
Absolutely. And the shared ownership is interesting, isn't it? You know, it works in some areas. In my village, it's really, really popular. We can't build enough of them. It's exactly what people want. I can absolutely see why in parts of Peterborough it wouldn't work. So let's hope they sell. But okay, so are we all happy to approve the recommendation? Which is just to note the affordable housing programme and the non-delivery of 4 of the 6 garage sites, which will lead to the loss of 8 to 11 units in total. This is subject to design and planning, and to approve the reallocation of the remaining funding for the garage sites, the stand ground site. This sum is £332,500. Is everyone in agreement with that? Anyone disagree? Anyone wish to abstain? So the recommendation is passed consensually. Asma, thank you very much. I know this has been a lot of work to keep on top of this. It's much appreciated. Thank you. Okay,
Thank you.
Are we all right with that? Yep. Okay, jolly good. And I think that brings us to the end. So it's quite a long time, wasn't it? Date of the next meeting, 22nd of January, back here. First time I'm going to say this.
Sorry, Chair. Can I just interrupt there? I've actually checked. The next meeting in January is in Peterborough at the
It's in Peterborough.
Burge-Pearson room.
How very inconvenient for some
Sorry.
of us. So, righty ho. Okay, thank you, and happy Christmas to the people I don't see in the interim. Seems awfully early. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for all your contributions. Thank you to all the officers.